Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello, I am Nita Anjalaena Agustina from class R4D with NPM 2020-12-500-173. Today in this video session, I would like to pretending as a teacher in senior high school, and I will using the receptive skill reading. So let's do it. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning class, how are you today? I hope you all doing good today. The material for today is reading. I would like to read some stories and I want to you all listen and read my story because later I will give some question. The title from the story is Kidnap Cafe. Help me, the two words crawl on a piece of paper. It fell out as I picked the ketchup bottle from the table. In front of me, the all-day breakfast that cafe advertised outside. We serve all-day breakfast all day, every day. The knot had been stuffed between the ketchup bottle and the mustard. Dry bits of red and yellow on each of the containers. I stared at the note and wondered how it got there. Must have been put there by a customer, someone bored and needing to do something to entertain themselves. I reached for the big mug of tea and took a big slurp of it. I really need this breakfast. As I picked up the cutlery, another note fell from the napkin. Behind the counter, the waitress busied herself making a coffee for a customer. A man in his 30s, upon pressed against the side of his face as he carried out a loud conversation. The waitress had her back to me. I opened the second note and read, "They have kidnapped me." Whoever did this was playing a very good trick. To go to the effort of putting a note on the inside of a napkin, wrap it around a knife and fork. How did they do it? They must have written it. They gone to the counter where all the cutlery was stashed next to the till, then opened one of the napkins and placed it inside. Who would go to that much effort? I squeezed some ketchup on the side of my plate between the bacon and the scrambled eggs. I cut into the bacon, pushed some egg on top of it, and put it in my mouth. On the far side of the cafe, a middle-aged couple sat at a table. The man read the newspaper while his wife stared out the window at the passing traffic. She turned her head and caught me looking and gave a smile. One of those awkward smiles when people don't know the other person. I nodded and smiled back, and she beamed a bigger smile. I picked up the steaming mug of tea beside my plate and took another gulp. As I put the cup down, I saw something protruding from the bottom. It fell, another folded up piece of paper. Call the police. I scrunched the paper up inside my hand and pulled it down under the table. This was no trick. This was no joke. I glanced around the cafe. The middle-aged couple on the far side, the guy busy on his phone at the counter, a guy behind me. I remember seeing him on the way in. He looked like a truck driver or something, a man going through his working day. I had to look at him, had to see what he was doing. I did one of those pretend movements and turned over my shoulder like I was looking for something. I caught a quick glance of him, his finished plate pushed toward. He slurped at his tea and read a page from his folded newspaper. 3 notes. This was no game. So what was it? And if someone was being held here against their will, how did they leave the notes beside the ketchup or in the napkin and under my cup? The waitress. It had to be her. Without thinking, I looked over to her. She brushed a lock of hair behind her ear and put the coffee of 4-pound man in front of me. She said something quickly to him and he looked at her impatiently. He carried on barking into his phone and pulled some money from his pocket. Practically threw it on the counter. As she picked it up, she made eye contact with me. I stared back at her, looking for a clue, for any sign, a gesture, or a flicker in her eye. But she just nodded and ran the money up in the till. Was it her? Was she the person who brought these 3 notes? Maybe someone out the back, someone forced to work in the kitchen, or someone downstairs. All the buildings on this street were old. They all had a basement. There were stairs going down to them. One of them was a taxi office, another a suntanning salon. But underneath the cafe, I couldn't remember. Maybe just an empty space, a large empty room with someone held captive down there, held against their will in a cold, dark cell. The food in front of me no longer seemed appetizing. I didn't want to eat it, but I didn't want to appear as doing anything unusual. Who comes into a cafe and orders food only to leave it uneaten? I shoveled another forkful of eggs into my mouth. They taste dry. I had just enough saliva in my mouth to swallow them down. The tea would have. I took another gulp from it. It had a metallic taste to it. My shirt stuck to my skin, sweat poured out of every pore. But there was no need for me to feel this way. I could get up and leave, walk out and find a policeman, show the notes and let them handle it. I was startled by a noise. The middle-aged man was now by the door, locking it. He did it towards the counter. I turned the waiter, took off her apron, and spoke quietly to the pawn man. He nodded to the man behind me. I heard his chair legs scrape against the floor as she got to his feet. I went to stand up, but my legs would not move. They felt like jelly. I grabbed the side of the table and tried to pull myself up, but it was like I was submerged underwater. The room spun round. Blood rushed to my head, and my hand grasped at the air in front of me. The last thing I saw was the people in the cafe coming towards me. So that's the end, and the question from the story is the first, where does this story take place? And then, what is the narrator about to eat? And then, where does the narrator find the first note? And then, what does the first note say? And then, how does he assume that note got there? And then, where does he find the second note? And then, who else is in the cafe? What does the second note say? Where does he find the third note? And the last is the cafe in a new or old building? So I think that's all for today. Thank you so much for your attention. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.